class. We're back in the classroom again doing our online lesson. It's very quiet in here without all of you, but hopefully we'll be back together soon. Now, our lesson this week is on Esther, who was a young lady. Like last week we talked about Daniel, him and his friends were also very young. They were maybe teenagers, maybe a little bit before teenagers, but God used them, and He can use each of us. It doesn't matter our age. He can use us. But I wanted to explain something to you about when they went into captivity. These are like the Israelites. We talked about when God brought them into the promised land, and God had a plan. He gave them, because there's 12 tribes, and He gave them each a different area. And they had to listen to God to run out the people that were there. God didn't clear all the people out and say, here you go, this is your land. He wanted them to listen to Him. There were different ways He had for different areas. But if they did not listen, and they didn't always listen, they would have like Canaanites and Amorites and Jebusites living with them. And that's not so bad if they are not changing their ways. If they stuck to God's ways and converted these people, that would be one thing. But they didn't. A lot of time, over time, they were converted to doing different things. Now, this is to put it in your perspective a little bit better, is in your neighborhood, you might be born and raised in North Carolina. So you're in North Carolinian. So you speak, and you wouldn't think that you have an accent because everybody sounds the same. But if you have a neighbor that came from Florida or Texas or Georgia or out west or maybe up north, their language is going to be different. Their the way they speak, the way they say things. Like, I came from New Jersey, even though you can't tell because I've been down here for a while. I speak more North Carolinian, as my family would say. But up there we talked about what you call drink, which is Coke or Pepsi or Mountain Dew. We called it pop or soda. And so I had to get used to drink. It's the same thing, just called by a different name, right? No big deal. But I also found out that in the foods, when I came down here, I love hot dogs. And hot dogs down here are served with mustard or ketchup, chili, and slaw. Never had I ate a hot dog with chili and slaw. I always ate it with mustard and sauerkraut. But now I love hot dogs with chili and sauce. So it's just a difference in different places in the United States. These people did things a lot different, but the most important thing is God did not want them to start worshiping other gods. There's only one true God, and we serve Him. Now, they served clouds. If it rained, they would be thankful to the clouds, to the cloud god, or to the weather god. I don't know what they called them, but they would be thankful. If their crops grew, they would be thankful to Mother Earth. None of those things are real. They do not. You can't pray to the earth and it's going to bring forth a plant. God is the only one that can make those things grow. So as they were taken into captivity, as they had these other people, they would hopefully teach them God's way, but more than likely they would be taught their way. As the Babylonians, the black ones, took over and took all of Daniel and his friends, they wanted to teach them their ways. So they changed Daniel and his friends' names. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They changed their names to Belteshazzar and Hadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which were honoring to their gods. They were different names. They also wanted to change what they ate. They changed it to when they worshipped and they sacrificed animals to their false gods, they would give the meat to these young men and wine. And Daniel, like in the song, we have teeny tiny seeds a big honking seed. So God placed a teeny tiny seed in Daniel and got him to speak to the man that was over them, and asked them if for 10 days they could just eat vegetables and drink water. And if in 10 days there was not a difference between him and his friends and the group they were with and the others, that they would eat the king's meat and drink the wine. Well, in 10 days. Now, this process was going to take 3 years, so 10 days isn't going to make a whole lot of difference. But it did, because God blessed them, and they seemed stronger. They were more clear thinking. They could answer questions about different things because they were very smart. Well, as a result, they were allowed to keep their diet the way it was. They also tried to change their thought process. They wanted them to learn about the Babylonian gods and the way they did things. So it was a day-to-day struggle for Daniel and his friends. As it came out that King Nebuchadnezzar had a bad dream. God gave him a bad dream. And it was one that he needed clarity. It kept bothering him. He kept having it. So he called all his wise men to come and interpret the dream for him. Well, they couldn't, because King Nebuchadnezzar was smart. He wasn't going to tell them the dream and then they made up an interpretation for him. He wanted them to tell him the dream. And they're like, there is nobody on earth that can do this. So he was going to have them all killed. Well, along with them was also Daniel and his friends. So Daniel asked one of the servants if he could go in and talk to King Nebuchadnezzar. And he did. He told King Nebuchadnezzar that if he would give him some time, that the only true God would be able to give him an answer on the interpretation. And King Nebuchadnezzar did. So in those couple of days that Daniel had time, they fasted, and he asked his friends to pray that God would give him an answer. Well, when he did, the answer was about this statue. This is the statue that was in King Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Now, it's made of different materials. The head is made of gold, and that is King Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians, because they're gold because they're stronger than the other kings around him. But this is why God gave him a big honking seed, for him to be able to tell this dream to a king that could have him killed. This is not a favorable dream. The next providence was made of silver, which is the Persians and the Medes, and they would take over Babylon. That's why they're next. And this is a lesser armor, but they would be able to take over the land. Now, I don't think King Nebuchadnezzar would have liked this, but this was what God gave Daniel, so he told King Nebuchadnezzar. Now, the next one down is like the Greeks, and then the Romans. And these are all lesser armies, but they would all be able to take over. Like I said, the black ones are Babylonians, and they are in charge of all these people. Now, the white ones we're going to use as the Persian and Medes. And this is the ones that took over next. And that's where we are with Esther. The Persians and the Medes took over. And Esther was a young Jewish girl. And she lived with her uncle Mordecai. Her uncle Mordecai raised her because her parents had died. It doesn't say exactly how. And her name was Hadassah. And Hadassah was a young, unmarried girl. And when King Ahasuerus no longer was going to have Queen Vashti, she would not honor him. She would not come to his banquets. So he took her crown away, and he was looking for a new queen. So they decided to bring some of the young, unmarried women to the palace. And for 1 year, they would train them, and as they call purifying, they would have no contact with other people, just the girls. And during this time, our sovereign God already knew that Esther would be queen. Now, the other girls did not know, and neither did the king know that she would be the one that was chosen. During this time, after she was crowned queen, her uncle used to always pass by the king's court. He was very concerned about her, and he would always come by the king's court, walk outside the gate, see what he could hear about his Esther, because he was very concerned. It was his idea to change her name to Esther so that they would not know that she was Jewish, because a lot of people did not like the Jews. The others did not like them, and they were scared of God that the Jews had, because, God did bring all those plagues upon Egypt when he brought his people out. So Mordecai was by the gate one day, and he heard two men talking about killing the king. And so he got a message to Esther and let her know about these two men that were devising a plan in secret to kill the king. And Esther brought it before her king and told him that these two men were going to kill him, or try to kill him. And as the plan worked its way out and he knew what was going on, these two men were killed. Well, during this time, King Ahasuerus promoted a man named Haman to chief officer of his empire. And Haman was a very proud man. You know that pride is not a good thing. He loved to see the people bow before him, and he gave them a sense of power and control. But however, Mordecai would not. He refused to bow to this man. That could be a teeny tiny seat or a big honking seat. Depends on how you look at it. Haman was furious, and he wanted to kill Mordecai. And if he had to do it in a roundabout way, he came up with a plan to have all the Jews killed. Now, this King Ahasuerus had like 127 provinces. He had a lot of land. So they had to send out a decree when he got the king to sign into order this law that on the 13th day of the 12th month, all the Jews would be killed. Now, Haman did not know, and King Ahasuerus did not know that Esther is also a Jew. These are her people. And that meant that she would be killed also. So I don't think King Ahasuerus would have liked that. So Ahasuerus signed a decree, and once he signs it and puts his mark on it with his ring, then nobody can change it, not even himself. Haman was so happy, and he just knew that he had everything in control. So Esther had read the law, and she just felt helpless. So she asked Mordecai to have the people pray and fast so that she would know what to do. She knew she was there for a purpose, and there's no other way that she would be in the palace when this happened without it being a purpose of God. So in those days, if you came before the king, you had to be invited in. You couldn't just knock on the door and walk in. If he did not invite you, you could be killed immediately. So when Queen Esther finally got to the door and the servants opened the door, of course, King Ahasuerus loved Esther very much, and he invited her in. He said, "What can I do for you, my queen? I will give you up to half of my kingdom. Please, your majesty, come to a banquet I am preparing, and please bring Haman as well." That night, King Ahasuerus and Haman came to the queen's banquet. She then invited them to come back a second night before making her request known. In the meantime, Haman again passed by Mordecai, who again refused to bow. And nothing Haman had in all of his riches was going to make him as happy as having Mordecai killed and killed on the gallows that he had prepared for all these Jews. That night, the king had trouble sleeping, and he finally had one of his servants bring the royal book. Now the whole event when Mordecai had let the secret plan, let that be known so that the king knew about it. It was wrote in the book of Chronicles. And that just happens to be, because we serve a sovereign God, where the servant read from. The servant read the part about the two men who had tried to assassinate the king. Including in the king's record was the fact that Mordecai had been the one to report the plan. So the king said, "How did we honor Mordecai?" And the servant said, "We didn't." As Haman was entering the palace for the day, King Ahasuerus asked Haman to come to him. "Haman," he asked, "what do you think I should do for a man I wish to honor?" Haman was delighted. "Surely the king wants to honor me," he thought. "I have just the plan." Well, after he told him to put the royal garments on and have him put on the royal horse and walk through the streets and make the people honor him and wave to him, what a twist that God put in his plan, because the person that the King Ahasuerus wanted to honor was Mordecai, the person Haman hated, but he had to be the one to lead the horse through the streets with Mordecai on it. And have the people, he had to holler to the people to honor Mordecai. And he himself really hated him. But God had a plan. So that evening, Haman and King Ahasuerus entered Queen Esther's second banquet. Ahasuerus asked Esther one more time to reveal her request. And she let King Ahasuerus know that Haman had got him to sign this law to have all the Jews killed just because he did not like Mordecai, and he wanted all the Jews killed. Well, the king was furious. How dare Haman plot against his queen? His queen was a Jew, and that would mean she would have to be killed also. So Haman begged for his life. He begged Queen Esther, but it did no good, because those gallows that he had erected for Mordecai to swing from, those are the same gallows that Haman and his followers and his family were hung on. Later on, God also helped King Ahasuerus put in a new law that all the Jews, because remember he couldn't change that law, not even himself. So he had a new law wrote that the Jews could defend themselves. And who was going to defend the Jews? Our sovereign God. He's always there with us. So they were able to defend themselves if anybody was to come against them. So God saved the Jewish people through Esther. Took a teeny tiny seed and a big honking seed, and he saved his people. And at a time like this, when we have to deal with the coronavirus and not being close to each other and all those, God's still in control, and he loves you, he loves me, and he has a plan. So I just want you to remember that. And if you want to plant a teeny tiny seed, share these other church videos, other classes, Miss Nikki's or Brother Chris, or even the adult classes with some of your neighbors or your family, and maybe they'll get to know the Lord, and you'll be helping to plant those teeny tiny seeds. So I love you, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.